Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Herding Squirrels, a podcast about modern teams. Joining us is Louie Celiberti. He's coming back. And just as a quick reminder, if you saw Louie's episode last season, Louie spent over 15 years at Guggenheim Partners, leading enterprise data and AI transformation at scale. And now Louie is starting a new firm, E27 Technology Solutions, where he helps organizations stop running AI pilots that go nowhere and start building something that actually sticks. Welcome back, Louie. We're excited to have you.
Oh, very excited to be back. I had so much fun last time. Told a lot of people about it. It was such a blast.
As did we, and so many topics that we covered last time that are still really relevant today, especially with like AI and innovation. And one of the things that we had talked about on a previous conversation here is that you're really seeing that CTO role shifting from being a driver of innovation to more of a shepherd of innovation. And I think that's a perfect place to start off. Like, say a little bit more about what you mean by that.
Yeah, I think it's an important evolution, right? It probably something, as I kind of mentioned last time when it came to dealing with the having the front office and having multiple perspectives, probably should have always been there, right? It started out with low code type of platforms, even prior to that, Excel, right? It's empowering the business to engineer and engineer innovations. Was never really adopted, and you had a lot of fragmented, disjointed, pocketed processes embedded in the business that weren't properly governed. And I don't mean govern in terms of control. I mean govern in terms of maturation. So with AI, it is prevalent. It is ubiquitous. It's incredibly accessible and even more easy to implement. So all of a sudden, the business is coming up with the innovation. And the beauty of that is the business always had the context of the business, right? They know what they need day in and day out. So the CTO or CIO role is now changing to like you said, shepherding it, harnessing this innovation in a way that it becomes scalable and sustainable, right? And that's what us as engineers and technologists bring is years and years and decades of processes and disciplines that have endured. Principles haven't gone away. They still apply and they will continue to apply. Now we just have very strong partners when it comes to bringing innovation.
I love it. And I think, like you mentioned, right, engineering principles, and I think in a previous note you had said something about engineering discipline as well. What's different about engineering principles and discipline that doesn't necessarily exist on the business side currently?
Naturally cross-functioning. I mean, IT in and of itself, engineers in and of themselves, have had to sit across the various business units, whether they were front office, revenue generators, or support on the legal compliance, operations, risk management side. We were always able to see all these things coming along. It's very hard to see those things when you're working within your perspective only. And the business has been trained to do that because that is their role, to take care of their perspective, their avenues, their tasks. They were never forced to look across, right? So sustainability, extensibility comes on top of the ability to connect the dots, whether it's reusability, whether it's understanding how one aspect can really benefit another aspect, that in isolation they look completely different, but as engineers we see how they connect. The other thing is what we all have as engineers is the gray hairs and no hairs of things breaking, right? And understanding what that pain feels like, and also understanding what it's like to have cross-pollinated talents that allow it to be supported and extended by multiple people, not just the original owner, right? We all want to do something that's innovative and be proud of it. Until we get tired of it, we would need to hand it off, right? So as engineers and as mature and experienced technologists, we understand how to build things in a way that other people can contribute. So you're maximizing the contribution. That eases the support and maintenance burden. We also know how to engineer it into certain components that can be handed off to maybe junior resources, right? Who need that to grow. That's what they need to cultivate their career. So it's a win for the juniors because they get exposed to how this stuff should work, and it's a win for the senior engineers because we are no longer shackled with the systems we built. That you learn that lesson over decades, right? And this is where the business is starting to learn that. They're more than capable of learning this. This has to do with not having the experience and never having gone through that trauma. And trust me, it is trauma. They just see the front thing, oh, we can get this done quick. Being quick is great. Being deliberate and methodical is even better. And none of those things are slow.
I love the way that you put in this tension between quick and deliberate and methodical, right? There's a balance there that needs to be found. And I'm just laughing because I'm picturing in my mind the business as like a 10-year-old that just got a new toy, right? And they're so excited. And here's the thing, I see myself in that because I'm not an engineer and I'm playing with AI constantly. I'm like, look at these fun toys I can play with. And to your point, right, there's the trauma, there's the challenge of learning some of these lessons that the engineering team has. So how do you take this excited 10-year-old with their new toy and impart some of this, like, hey, right, we need to be deliberate. We need to, quick is good, right? But we have balance here. How do you get that lesson to land when you have all these excited kids? Because it's the business is such a big category, right? It's sales, it's marketing, it's product, it's legal. I mean, everyone's dipping their toes in the water of this right now. So now you have dozens of kids with new toys, and you're now like, oh, okay, hold on. Like, how do you do that? Like, where do you even start?
Well, it's a good point because you brought up those different parties. And we talked about this last time too, is your discussions now have to be more cross-functional than they have ever been, right? So you have to have everybody impart their wisdom. And psychologically, when everyone has an opportunity to impart their wisdom, they also learn to appreciate to listen, right? Because they feel like they had their turn. And now they're willing to learn. It's a concept I call mutual mentorship. It's very important. Mentorship should have never been one directional. If I'm mentoring you, I'm learning from you. I'm either learning how you're learning from me, or as you're reacting, I'm learning. That's all mutual. So whether you're a manager or an employee, everyone you're surrounded by is your mentors. So you bring that culture in. And why is that important? Because as a business person brought in this new algorithm that does something, when they're talking, showing that, and legal and compliance are in the room with them, they're reacting real time. This isn't, oh, let me get so far ahead of my skis, only for legal compliance and security to pull it back, right? Getting in front of that disappointment, there's always going to be disappointment, there's always going to be conflict, but you're making them in smaller cycles. You're not going a long time developing something and then pulling it back. These are short cycles. And the other thing is, psychologically, if we build good relationships, I'm willing to give yours a shot, your idea a shot, your approach, and I will guarantee you about 20% of it is going to come from me inevitably, right? Or everybody else. So you get this feeling of vested interest. Everybody is in it together. There's that pure team mentality. So as a business person, I realize, oh, you're telling me what I'm building, I can make last. What I'm building, I can have more people use. And they see it in real time because they watch this evolve. But that whole evolution, we're humans. It's not going to go perfectly every time. What you want are short setbacks that happen early and often. The whole fail fast, but fail forward, right? And a lot of this is psychology, right? A lot of this is just human nature. Everybody wants to be part of something. At the same time, they want to be empowered. So how do you strike that balance? You bring everybody together and you let them share, what we talked about, what gets them out of bed every morning and what keeps them in bed each morning, right? There is anxieties and fears that we all have in the business, but we are going to have to do this together in order to grow. And at the end of each week, we would have grown almost exponentially. And it all started with that innovation coming from the area that it historically didn't used to come from.
Louie, where do you find, I think the biggest thing in my mind right now after that is like, where do you find the time? Because I think there's this pressure that, at least that I'm hearing, is happening, right, with boards and the senior leadership group saying, like, we've got to figure out AI somehow. And so there's this push internally to say how, right, where, what, because a lot of organizations are not quite sure. They have some ideas.
Yeah.
And then from the people side, right, I mean, I'm hearing everything from, right, there's people like me that are like, cool, fun toys, let's go play, I want to have fun. And then there's folks that are like, I don't want to touch it, right? It's more work, it's more change, it's more shift, and it's unknown, right? There's a lot of gray space still. How do you slow down enough to take the time and yet still move forward fast enough to appease and show progress, right? Progress and growth and forward momentum. It seems like there's a real tension there.
Sure. No, and it is real. Small pieces, manageable units, easier to learn, easier to understand, easier to execute. But those small pieces have to be multidimensional. They have to represent most, if not all, of the perspectives. It's the thin slice. As we emphasized last time, start with the use case, right? Start with a very grounded and understood use case. Doesn't have to be game-changing, but it has to represent some form of progress. Right? But you have to make it small and multidimensional. The size and quantity should come in the number of dimensions, not in its footprint or impact on one aspect of the business. It has to be narrow, shallow, I say, and I hate to use that word because there's bad connotations to that, but it has to be shallow enough where you're not spinning wheels in a certain dimension, but it's wide enough where you're going across each. And you can move very quickly like that. I use the term, I learned it in trading, liquidity. The most effective markets are the ones that are the most liquid, and liquid generally means the ones that can trade in the smallest amounts and then scale up. And that's the mentality you need. You need to work everything into small manageable chunks. Again, they're easy to understand, easy to explain, easy to execute, and when you fail, they're finite. But you're never really failing, you're learning.
This is about really managing risk. And I love how you frame the shallow piece of it, because in my mind I'm seeing the stream that I can walk across. It's only ankle deep. In worst case scenario, if it goes down a foot, I'm okay. I'm only knee deep in water, right? Versus I'm out in the middle of the ocean and I'm just gonna cannonball in and let's see what happens, right?
Great analogy.
It's managing the risk where the failure is fine, right? It's like, even like worst case scenario, nothing's getting broken, nothing is or it's getting broken to a point that we can handle, right? Whatever the repercussions are. Yet in some places, that's even scary, especially the organizations that are dealing in higher risk. I had a previous guest on that worked in like credential management, like really secure, and we were talking about AI adoption on, again, very similar, like there's not much room for failure in that type of space. And I think your bite-sized approach is is not only wise, but it makes a lot of sense. But I think there might be another contingent out there that wants to move much faster than that. Like, so how do you advise patience? Like, it's almost slowing down to speed up, right?
Oh, it absolutely is. And listen, it takes a level of maturity and stomach
Okay.
to be able to push back and say, we are moving forward. The other thing is measuring progress. I would say 25% of it is really learning what to do. Even more importantly, learning what not to do. Even after you did it, you can learn not to do that again. That's really valuable. And then it's just trust because of the amount of people you have involved. The people who want to see it move faster are generally the ones that aren't involved because they're not seeing it. And yeah, listen, this could be a CEO who can't get involved to that extent. So you have to figure out how to keep he or she in the loop. You have to have he or she feel the progress. How often when we're doing something, do we feel like we're making great progress and then someone who hasn't been involved comes by 2 days later and goes, well, what have you been doing? Because they haven't seen that happen. So the more people you have involved, less people are going to gripe about lack of movement. And for those who just physically can't be there, you have to work really hard on showing them progress, but not task counting. Like, this isn't we got 15 Jira cards done. This is how do you tie that progress into something that is relevant to them. Why building out some aspect of security can be seen as progress to revenue generating. Well, you frame it as, if we don't do this, your revenue is going to be spent on fines. Everything is linked to business value when you put the time in to get that message across. There is no such thing as non-functional requirements being done just because security says it. You have to do it in the way that it relates to how business is going to be better.
Looking into the different types of organizations, and I think right now, if you're an AI focused startup, yeah, right, no problem. Everyone's using AI for almost everything. It's part of the expectation. But if you're part of a 100-year-old, insurance company, how do you inspire change, which in a group that probably has a much higher percentage of, I guess we'll just say laggards, right? When you think of the diffusion of innovation curve, you have more laggards or more people maybe that are in that early and late majority, and maybe not as many innovators and trendsetters because of consistency and a highly regulated field that has not seen a lot of change in the previous years. How do you approach that differently, or does your approach change?
No, you have to. Right? Again, we're dealing with people. So we're people. We're dealing with human beings, each with their own motivations and fears and experiences and traumas. You starts with emotional intelligence, right? What is driving this person who I'm about to talk to? What is holding them back? And tapping into that. If it's someone who is less likely to do research on their own, you may have to put a lot of effort to show them how this could make their job better. I see this as an opportunity for all of us to get rid of the mundane tasks we never wanted to do in the beginning. Even in software engineering, no one ever told you that after a few years, you spend most of your time supporting the systems you built over those 3 years. And that's not fun. So with AI, I can release that burden. And you always have to show it as, here's a chance to grow. And you just kind of hope that people want to grow. And in my experience, most people do. Not everybody, and then you have to figure out how to insulate and isolate those individuals who would then negatively impact the culture for the rest of the team. So there are going to be people who just won't want to do it. So now you have to turn your efforts away from convincing them towards protecting everybody else from them. from a culture standpoint.
It's interesting. I love your frame on, and I'm just going to make an assumption here based on what you're saying, but it almost feels like we need to collaborate more, right? Like now that those those mundane tasks are off our table, it's getting that domain expertise shared across levels, across the borders, the silos that may exist already, so that outcomes are better. Is that an accurate?
Oh, 100%. We said it before, it started with the cloud, right? Engineers thought because they had access to these things, they can just drag and drop VMs and set up subnets and public and private networks, but they didn't have the years of networking and security principles behind them. That's the difference between having it accessible and having it and doing it right. So in order for this to succeed, those collaboration efforts, those cohesive understandings have to come up day zero and continuous. You can't let up because it moves so quickly. Your mistake is going to grow bigger sooner, and mistakes often occur because of lack of perspective. So the collaboration is absolutely paramount.
What does that mean from a skill set perspective, right? So I like to frame it like this, right? If you're a CTO, you're senior engineering leader, what skill sets should that group really be focusing on to grow in this next phase of business that we're moving into?
I like to call it talents. Skills are things that you can obtain in isolation. ChatGPT, Google, YouTube. Those are skills, reading a book. Talents are those less tangible characteristics that allow individuals and teams to succeed. So one of the talents is, again, emotional intelligence, empathy, the willingness to listen and hear, not just wait for your turn to speak, right? Truly understand what the person or people you're talking to are going through, what's motivating. That takes a lot of effort. That takes a lot of energy, because not only are we worried about what's going through our mind, now we have to set that aside and try to figure out what's going through everyone else's mind. Again, connecting the dots, that's a huge talent. How you can be in multiple conversations separately and be able to draw lines of the patterns that they represent, or within a discussion. I'm sure you've been in meetings, 5, 6 people. They're all saying the same things, but they don't realize how much they really have in common, right? So that's a true talent, to say, hey, oh, that's what they're saying. And even that person, no, that's not what I was saying. Well, it is, because this is what it came across as, and they, oh, I got it, right? I think those are one of the most tremendous talents, is to be able to connect those dots. And again, as technologists who are forced to learn different perspectives, we kind of adapted to be able to have that.
It makes a lot of sense. I've never thought of it from that lens before. And I as an operator in my background, that's something that has been, seeing the conversation and what everyone's trying to actually say versus what they're actually saying. But that makes sense from an engineering standpoint, because again, you're building and your inputs are coming from so many different areas that you have to read between the lines sometimes, and you have to make some assumptions and check up on those assumptions. I love that. That's extremely powerful, and that tied with the empathy piece makes a ton of sense. I want to go back to how you've positioned E27. Why do you think companies are having a challenging time with AI pilots? What's getting in the way of their success?
I'll give you 2 examples. One's abstract and one's a little more tangible. The abstract one, and they relate to each other. The abstract one is hubris, right? This is my idea. This is my innovation. We got to put it through. We got to rush it through. I'm right. I know I'm right. I'm smart. That happens a lot. And that happens 1,000 times a day throughout an organization, right? So how do you mitigate that? Bring people together. The smartest people will recognize what they don't know once they start talking to everybody, because then they'll realize, oh, you know what, I didn't think. And again, it's not intelligence, it's lack of experience, lack of perspective. We just can't learn every single angle every day. Now, the more tangible piece is you have AI that accelerates 3 things: generation of code, generation of context, generation of insight, all for the purposes of eventually generating intelligence, right? That's why we do all this. So you can accelerate your code generation through AI. So you can build things a lot quicker. You can then gain context on those things a lot quicker and then glean insights from those things. Because those tools are readily available to us, Claude Code, Cursor, you now have the ability to write 5 or 6 different prototypes and then ask Claude Code and Cursor and say, what are the reusable components of those? So now when you pull out those reusable components, technical components, you could take that up another level and say business functionality, document contextualization, OCR, Vision AI. You now can remove the prototypes and look at it as an ecosystem of capabilities, right? That were rooted in the prototypes. That's the importance of rooting them in the use case. But with that ecosystem of capabilities, now you could almost mix and match to make up whatever new use case or whatever project you want to put in production. So what I think people are lacking is building out the ecosystem from day one, because historically building out an ecosystem meant, let me write all this abstracted code so that I could write reusable components, and that would take months. And guess what? It was in absence of the real use case, so then your use case met. So you waited months to find out that your wonderful ecosystem wasn't practical. But now with these tools, you can do this in days. So you spin up 5, 6, 10 use cases in a month, abstract them out to capabilities, and then talk to the business and talk about capabilities and tying them to their use cases. And then picking the 1 or 2 that you put in production that you think are going to have the biggest impact on the business, or at least be able to learn the most, right? Think about that, where when everything used to take a long time, you had to be really confident in your first decision and follow that through. So I think right now everyone's still doing the art of the possible, and what they're learning is most things are possible now. So forget about it. It's going to work. It's just a matter of how do you implement so that you can build other things and you can make it sustainable. That's the real question now. The question isn't, can I ask a question and get information about this document source? We know that works. We know that agentic AI works. It's just a matter of how do you execute it. And what's happening is they're learning the lesson of how after the pilot, not during the pilot. And when you do it during the pilot, you do it in a way of understanding the capabilities and understanding how you can mix and match those capabilities. Then day 1 after the pilot, you have this vast amount of functionality that you can apply everywhere, and you have an understanding of how to implement, as opposed to, oh, wow, this is great. I can't believe this worked. Now what do we do? Assume it's going to work. It will work, but you will be able to do things so much quicker and learn those lessons so much quicker. That's what I really think is going on. Now in 3 years, people are going to realize what I said, and that all of this is possible. We should have been focusing on the how out of the gate, and they're going to start doing that. It's just a matter of time. People will catch up.
You got it again.
It's just really phase.
I'm going to go back to the 10-year-olds with their toys, right? They've got to play. Yeah. They've got to play a little bit. You maybe break a couple things. Hopefully not too bad. Stay in the shallow water, and then learn to focus. Right? Learn to
exactly right.
Get it tied down. Oh my gosh, Louie, this has been fantastic. Where can we find you now online? Do you have a new website?
Yeah, we do. Just launched about a week ago. It's E27 Technology Solutions. .io. Of course, that sounds more advanced, right? I think if you put .com, it'll resolve. But E27technologysolutions.io.
Well, we'll put that in our show notes. And again, that's going to be it's up. It's in building right now. But Louie, we can't wait to see what you're building with E27. And thank you so much for coming back on Herding Squirrels. We love having you and your insights. They're amazing. And thanks, folks, for listening. Again, this is Herding Squirrels, where we uncover the nuts and bolts of teams. Thank you, Louie.
Always fun.